On a bustling street in Japan, the girl happily walked alongside the snail person, blending into the busy crowd. They passed by billboards advertising newly built luxury apartments exclusively for alien residents. Advertising banners for luxury apartments for aliens were strung everywhere, accompanied by signs for free priority parking for them. Meanwhile, the girl continued to chat happily with the snail person next to a vending machine. As they both strolled leisurely through the passing crowd on the street, the snail person suddenly stopped short as if they had just realized something important. Surprisingly, the protagonist embraced the girl, and together they looked up at the large screen on the building announcing the MVP winner, while the giant snail person stood silently behind them under the star-filled night sky. The protagonist appeared with a bruised face, a bandaged nose, and tired eyes, seemingly having just gone through an unpleasant altercation. While walking with the girl, the snail person suddenly called out loudly towards the protagonist, who was standing alone further down the street. The protagonist angrily pointed at her bleeding nose, loudly accusing the snail person of having elbowed her in the face, causing the other to turn back with a look of utter astonishment. The girl hastily bowed in apology on behalf of her companion, but the protagonist remained furious, shouting that the profusely bleeding wound was undeniable proof. The protagonist stormed off grumbling, continuously muttering bitter words about hating women who used cheesy nicknames and cursing the aliens who never knew how to apologize. Though secretly grateful that the aliens had destroyed the meteor and saved Earth, the protagonist still felt annoyed by their disdainful attitude, even though she knew speaking out would only invite trouble upon herself. On the streets, posters for New Cosmos Week were plastered everywhere, reminding everyone not to forget the love and gratitude from that fateful day. A news report on the large screen announced that the alien population in Japan had skyrocketed, while the protagonist pushed through the crowd, muttering rude complaints at two snail people who were blocking the way. On television, a boy and a female reporter enthusiastically expressed deep gratitude to the aliens who had discovered this planet and prevented the meteor catastrophe. The protagonist stood silently with a pensive expression, her gaze distant and filled with unfathomable thoughts. News about journeys to the moon thanks to alien technology flooded the television, but the protagonist quietly bowed her head and listened, turning her back on the commotion. The protagonist walked with a melancholy expression. She stopped in front of a burger shop but then walked past it, her lonely and weary appearance evident on her face. The protagonist walked along, lamenting her meager salary, secretly longing for the taste of meat, which she hadn't tasted in years. However, the protagonist quickly composed herself, telling herself that she must not succumb to this weak self-pity. Walking alongside the snail person under the night lights, the protagonist and her companion shouted positive slogans, encouraging each other to cast off their misery. The scene shifts to a quiet school with a large, closed gate, surrounded by dense trees. Suddenly, the female lead appeared in a state of extreme tension, drenched in sweat, and a nosebleed began to gush out. Meanwhile, the elephant trunk man received an urgent notification from security about a listening device. He frantically sprayed his ear with a can to drown out the warning sound. At the factory, the pig-headed manager angrily yelled and sprayed directly into the female lead's face, suspecting him of dishonesty, leaving him to endure it in shock. Two female employees nearby whispered about Nomomoto having trouble with the boss again, while also expressing their dislike for her usual grumpy attitude. The pig-headed man didn't hesitate to strike worker hard on the back of the neck and continued to scold him harshly, making him suppress his desire to resist due to the fear of losing his job. The female lead anxiously watched the black-haired guy bravely stand up to question the pig-headed man about being a boss without knowing the local language, while also criticizing the poor working conditions. Seeing the female lead's nosebleed, the black-haired guy spun around and glared at the pig-headed manager, who was sweating profusely. With his shirt drenched on one shoulder, the black-haired guy angrily looked directly at the person opposite him, asserting in a low, firm voice that he had just been assaulted. After the incident, Worker B happily thanked Worker A for defending him earlier as they both left the factory. Namamoto, the charismatic blonde girl, excitedly introduced herself and handed a can of coffee to Kirami, not forgetting to praise herself for being cool. The group of workers sat drinking and chatting. The female lead worried about resisting because all the superiors were aliens, while the black-haired guy admitted that society as a whole was on their side. The black-haired guy stood silently holding a can of drink, looking up at the sky next to the tall buildings with a thoughtful expression. The female lead appeared confused and unnerved by the black-haired guy's profound philosophical words, just before countless streaks of light, like a meteor shower, appeared in the sky. Holding her phone displaying a meager payslip, the female lead couldn't hide her extreme shock and disappointment. The female lead sat down on the ground, desperate to find a new job but facing barriers of age and skills, and firmly resolved not to return to her old, difficult family situation. She sat in contemplation, unable to understand why people could smile and work themselves to the bone for alien bosses, only to receive paltry sums in return. Looking up at the gloomy sky, the female lead secretly wished that all of them would simply vanish from this world. Although her reason acknowledged gratitude for the salvific technology, the female lead still felt a deep sense of wrongness and couldn't stop herself from disliking this reality. The female lead sat huddled, telling herself that if she voiced those rebellious thoughts, trouble would surely come upon her immediately. Standing in the pouring rain, the female lead gazed into the distance, tormented herself over the negative emotions she believed she shouldn't possess. To forget her gnawing hunger, the female lead tried to distract herself by watching dog videos. But the image of a dog happily eating fish only made the situation more ironic. On the windy riverbank, the female lead carried a long stick on her shoulder, silently gazing at the city skyline and the distant bridge. The female lead was fishing when she was startled and turned around, seeing the dark-haired guy approaching. He was equally surprised to encounter her there. The dark-haired guy struck up a conversation with Kidami, sharing that he was a local and had been connected to this beach since childhood. The female lead eagerly showed off her homemade fishing rod, but the dark-haired guy expressed doubt about the chances of catching fish this season and offered to examine it. The two fished together by the riverbank. The dark-haired guy stood patiently while the female lead squatted beside him, gazing intently at the water reflecting distant buildings. After 3 hours of waiting, the dark-haired guy finally caught a small fish. He intended to give it to the female lead, who was beaming, claiming the credit belonged to her rod. However, in the moment of excited exchange, the female lead accidentally dropped the fish, causing the dark-haired guy to utter a sound of regret. The fish splashed into the water, creating a spray, leaving the female lead sprawled on the rocky bank in dejection, while the dark-haired guy calmly continued fishing. Sitting by the seashore, the dark-haired guy mused to the female lead about the world's transformation, as the water now only reflected the images of thousands of spacecraft overhead. The roaring ocean waves seemed to echo the regret for a familiar ocean where their family once played, now no longer pristine as before. The dark-haired guy fondly recalled memories of fishing with his younger sister, but when the female lead eagerly inquired, he replied with a sorrowful gaze that she was no longer with them. The female lead recounted the tragedy when a luxurious car sped towards them just as her family was celebrating her high school admission, shattering all their joy. The dark-haired guy bitterly recounted that the perpetrator had fled and the police didn't even bother to pursue them, though he was certain it was a drunk driver. With a heavy gaze, the dark-haired guy revealed the painful truth that his entire family had been eliminated by the aliens themselves. When asked why the authorities ignored it, the female lead speculated that perhaps they feared causing an interstellar conflict if handled improperly. The female lead and the dark-haired guy looked towards the strange structure on the horizon, wondering about its anomaly amidst this chaotic world. The female lead began to suspect the strange coincidences, as all events seemed to be orchestrated to benefit the alien faction. A big question arose. Had there truly been a giant meteor hurtling towards Earth from the beginning? The dark-haired guy proposed a chilling hypothesis that with their superior technology, they might have staged this entire salvation play to carry out a peaceful invasion. The female lead was stunned, her mouth agape as she heard those sharp and unsettling deductions, things she had never dared to consider. The female lead noticed that everyone around her not only loved but also revered the aliens, making her suspicions feel out of place amidst the crowd. The dark-haired young man couldn't contain his indignation, declaring that no matter what happened to the world, he would never forgive those who had shattered his family. Sitting together, gazing into the indefinite void, one of them uttered a dark wish, hoping they would all vanish into nothingness. The female lead confessed to the dark-haired young man that she, too, always carried the same resentment and heavy burden within her. Unexpectedly changing her demeanor, the female lead flashed a challenging smile, revealing sharp teeth, and invited the dark-haired young man to vent all the snarky comments in their hearts to their heart's content. The scene shifted to three snail-people creatures with bizarre forms standing silently in the water, creating a scene that was both peaceful and strange. Suddenly, the water surface was violently disturbed, water splashing wildly into the air, accompanied by loud, dramatic sounds. It turned out to be the female lead and the dark-haired young man splashing water at each other, laughing heartily like children, temporarily forgetting their heavy worries. The female lead kicked water and shouted in indignation, berating the bulky boss for daring to use the cooling spray alone while making his employees endure the heat. The dark-haired young man also joined in, shouting into the void, denouncing the arrogant ones as ugly fools who only knew how to bask in the adulation of others. Both laughed loudly, competing to shout curses of demise towards the invisible crowd, demanding justice and releasing all their long-suppressed resentment. The female lead grinned from ear to ear, exclaiming that venting anger like this was much more enjoyable and refreshing than she had ever imagined. The dark-haired young man couldn't help but burst into hearty laughter. His radiant face lit up with a rare joy amidst the gloomy reality. The female lead closed her eyes tightly, smiling, surprised to realize that letting go of suppression and shouting to her heart's content brought such a wonderful sense of liberation. As night fell by the river, the question "miserable?" hung in the air, recalling quiet reflections after those moments of outburst. Memories flooded back with an image of the female lead in the past, her face bruised, nose bleeding profusely, and sweat-soaked from exhaustion. In that memory, a profusely sweating snail person was speaking a strange language to the female lead next to a vending machine. The female lead frowned and complained as the snail person vented anger about the heat, while he struggled with a lighter that wouldn't light his cigarette. The female lead recalled with shock the fateful moment when she hadn't known the cooling spray contained flammable gas, leading to a fierce flame erupting right in her hand. Amidst the chaotic scene, the protagonist stood stunned as a sudden blast sent everything flying, with debris and a heart-shaped key whizzing past her face. The sudden shock caused the protagonist to widen her eyes in horror, sweat pouring down her face as her nose began to bleed profusely. Immediately, a violent aftershock erupted, tearing through space with incredible speed and immense force. Without hesitation, the protagonist launched a powerful punch forward, the immense power creating a large explosion that blew away the surrounding shelves. Standing before the massive, dark creature lying motionless, the protagonist confusedly clutched her stomach. Her nosebleed still hadn't stopped as she uttered a sound of surprise. In the cold storage room, the protagonist stood beside a strange, dark mass, her pensive gaze fixed on her left hand. Suddenly called by a frantic voice from outside, Nomomoto startled, turned around, and screamed in terror. At the same time, the protagonist appeared with an expression of extreme panic, while three workers at the door simultaneously covered their mouths in shock at the tremor that had just occurred. In the urgent situation, the protagonist exclaimed, asking why the other person was just standing there. But the girl with braided hair turned back in pain, choking out a counter-question that they should have called for help. Night fell, enveloping the quiet residential area, where houses were shrouded in darkness beneath a starry sky, a meteor streaking across it. The protagonist stared in shock at the notice in her hand, the cold words declaring her termination, accompanied by harsh condemnations. The protagonist collapsed onto her bed, screaming in fury and unable to believe she had been dismissed so unfairly. However, as her anger subsided, the protagonist pensively realized something unsettling. She felt no guilt whatsoever. Elsewhere, the protagonist startled awake in bed, her eyes wide with confusion, as if she had just realized something amiss. Lying restlessly, her eyes dark and weary, The protagonist despaired about her bleak future, now officially unemployed and unsure what to do next. Placing a hand on her stomach, the protagonist sank into memories, recalling the days when she was an innocent child. Amidst towering skyscrapers, a simple yet intense dream echoed in her mind. The desire to eat to her heart's content like a king every day. Her phone rang, displaying Katami's name, but the protagonist lay still on her bed, ignoring the persistent sound. Katami unexpectedly called, asking for a favor, and casually announced she was right outside her door, which made the protagonist panic, wondering how her address had been revealed. The protagonist stood at the door, pleading to be let in, and although the person inside found her tone unsettling, they reluctantly agreed on the condition that she wouldn't stay long. The female lead clicked her tongue in annoyance after accidentally dropping the pills, then irritably turned back to ask what exactly was happening. In a dramatic scene, the black-haired guy stood silently with a bloodstain on his neck, caught between a giant holding a bone and the approaching female lead. The female lead stared ahead, eyes wide with terror and sweat pouring down, as if facing her ultimate fear. With a face drenched in sweat and a streaming nosebleed, the black-haired guy desperately called for help, admitting he was in deep trouble. Sharp black and white lines intertwined, creating an invisible sense of chaos and tension. The black-haired guy, carrying the strange creature, recounted how he was attacked, and in a fit of rage because the other party didn't apologize, he accidentally caused its end. Hearing about the elimination of the alien, the female lead was shocked and feared the death penalty. But the black-haired guy asserted that taking a life is wrong and punishment is inevitable. The black-haired guy tremblingly asked if the female lead thought the same, but she coldly replied that she didn't consider the creature human. Carrying the body on his shoulder, the black-haired guy urgently asked the female lead for help to dispose of it, affirming that she was the only one he could trust. The female lead bit her lip in worry, her mind racing with how to handle this mess smoothly. Burial and dumping into the sea were both ruled out due to the risk of detection from foul odor and decomposition gases, while chemicals would be too conspicuous. The black-haired guy suggested the gruesome method of breaking down and boiling the body, which freaked out the female lead and made her wonder why she was being dragged into being an accomplice. Poking his head in with a giant turkey on his shoulder, the black-haired guy reminded her that the female lead hated aliens just as much as he did. The female lead still hesitated to refuse, but at that moment, her rumbling stomach betrayed her resolve. The female lead stood still, observing a rough, black mass growing into a strange shape in the middle of the floor. Entering the room with the strange creature on his shoulder, the black-haired guy began his story with a serious expression, while the female lead bowed her head and listened. The female lead shivered, recalling the horrifying memory at the factory, where the acrid smell of her boss's burnt remains still haunted her. However, with a mischievous smile, the female lead confessed that the smell was actually as fragrant as tempting grilled squid. The black-haired guy was stunned, a nosebleed streaming as he sensed lurking danger behind him, stammering Nomomoto's name in a panic. Standing at the door, the black-haired guy, carrying the turkey, admitted everything was messed up, but also sarcastically remarked that the female lead wasn't any better. Realizing they were both at their wits' end, the female lead calmly put on her mask and decided to try and handle the situation. Her hands deftly flipped the pan on the stove, where a strange spherical mass was bubbling in murky black liquid. A strong, foul odor wafted up, making the female lead grimace, while the dark-haired guy pushed aside his disgust to begin dipping his hands into the murky black tub. The female lead held her nose and took a bite, then her eyes widened in surprise, while her companion could only turn away with a look of apprehension. The female lead excitedly exclaimed that the dish was delicious, leaving the dark-haired guy standing nearby utterly stunned. The cramped bathroom, with bottles neatly arranged on the shelves, became the site of secret activities. A colossal piece of roasted meat, steaming profusely, seemed to whisper of misery and self-pity. But then an unseen voice affirmed that nothing else mattered once the stomach was filled with good food. A succulent, glistening meat leg sat prominently on the table, temptingly inviting. In an abstract space, Two blurry figures stood opposite each other like undefined entities in the void. The female lead happily enjoyed the alien meat and bones, praising it profusely, even as the dark-haired guy beside her looked at her as if she were insane because of that foul stench. The female lead casually suggested that if the dark-haired guy could eat them all, it would be the perfect way to dispose of the evidence. Under the city night sky, a crazy plan was hatched. One to eliminate, one to consume, with the hope of permanently eradicating the aliens. Although initially just a wild idea, the enthusiastic approval transformed it into motivation for this peculiar duo to strive for a better life. Suddenly, the scene of a horrific accident appeared with two mangled, smoking cars, raising questions about what was hidden within the wreckage. Inside the car, a long-haired girl sat motionless, her hair falling to obscure her mysterious face. The dark-haired guy slumped to the ground, drenched in sweat, desperately calling out the names of his loved ones in vain beside the woman with her back turned. Despite the desperate pleas, the black car coldly sped away, leaving a hazy trail of dust behind. A violent wave of nausea struck, forcing the dark-haired guy to cover his mouth, his eyes wide and strained as he tried to suppress the rising discomfort. Unable to bear it any longer, he violently vomited into the sink, while the female lead stood behind, observing with a devilish, toothy grin. While the disgusted black-haired guy turned away, the female lead leaned against the door and giggled uncontrollably, amused by her friend's reaction. The black-haired guy grimaced as he described the horrible taste, like sewage water, and the rubbery texture of the meat, unable to comprehend how anyone could stomach it. The female lead still insisted the dish was delicious and criticized her friend's taste buds, leaving him to clutch his head and complain to the heavens about this peculiarity. The ding-dong of the doorbell echoed in the dead of night, startling the whole group awake, worried about who would visit at this hour. Peeking through the peephole, they recognized the annoying alien neighbors, who always complained about noise even though they were hardly quiet themselves. The black-haired guy suspected that this couple were fugitives on the run from another planet, hiding out in this dilapidated apartment complex. The female lead anxiously turned to ask if their secret conversation might have been overheard by those outside the door. The black-haired guy feared the foul metallic smell from the pot of water would give them away, though his companion tried to reassure him it was just steam. The doorbell continued to ring persistently, accompanied by the peculiar neighbor's anger, causing the two guys inside to increasingly lose patience. Fearing the police would be called, the black-haired guy urged the female lead to quickly open the door and resolve this issue. The door creaked open with an ear-splitting sound, revealing the female lead's tired and annoyed face. Before them were three peculiar uninvited guests, a long-haired woman and two creatures with whimsical cloud-shaped heads. With sharp, cold eyes beneath her tangled hair, the female lead coldly asked what these people wanted at this hour. The female lead stood opposite the round-figured neighbors, her eyes gleaming with high alert. Upon hearing the question from the cloud-shaped creatures, the female lead was momentarily flustered before her gaze sharpened and became more intense. The round-figured neighbor began to complain that the ceiling was too low, causing her to suffer from claustrophobia. Hearing the absurd complaint, the female lead looked up with a smirk full of disdain and defiance. It turned out they had come to get signatures for a petition to raise the ceiling, and when questioned about the late hour, the woman casually replied that they were nocturnal creatures. Suddenly, the neighbors covered their noses and criticized the female lead for reeking intensely, ordering her to take a shower immediately. The two women, covering their noses in disgust, shouted for a rent reduction, claiming they had to live next to such a stinky person. After escaping danger, the female lead stands in a room with cabinets and a microwave, announcing that their pursuers have left. Meanwhile, the dark-haired guy sits on the floor, smirking ironically as he remarks that it seems the aliens didn't hear them, and even they think their flesh stinks. With a tense expression and wide eyes, the female lead declares her resolve that next time, she will devour them raw. The dark-haired guy unexpectedly asks about the boy's next-time promise, and the boy replies with a determined look that the dark-haired guy was the one who said it, that he would eliminate and the boy would eat, until they got rid of all their adversaries. The dark-haired guy worriedly remarks that it's just a pipe dream and urges the female lead to think more carefully about it. The female lead asks a strange question, assuming there are 60,000 aliens in the city and asking how many years it would take to consume them all if they ate 3 meals every day. But the dark-haired guy doesn't know the answer. Immediately after, they both sit silently, looking at a phone. The boy anxiously looks at the phone, which displays a number close to 55 years, and asserts that it's impossible because their adversaries would just keep multiplying during that time. With a slight smile, the female lead remarks that it just means they have to keep at it for over 55 more years, making the dark-haired guy ask in surprise if she's truly serious. The female lead further explains that even if they can't eliminate all the monsters, they'll still get to defeat them daily, and that's pretty great. With a determined gaze, the female lead affirms that one should not underestimate an unemployed woman, because there's nothing she can't accomplish. The female lead smiles contentedly, gives a thumbs up, and declares it the best meal she'd ever had. She would be a happy old woman if she could keep consuming like this until old age. The female lead raises a veiny hand, pointing forward, accompanied by a derogatory remark, "What a weirdo." In the evening, the dark-haired guy and the female lead are walking together on the sidewalk, with the dark-haired guy bowing his head in thought while the female lead appears tired or sleepy. As the dark-haired guy and the female lead walk under the starry night sky, the female lead asserts that she will be the one to eliminate them, as she said before, because if it's not her, everything will become meaningless. With an extremely excited expression, grinning widely and revealing her sharp teeth, the female lead is tasked with handling it and can feast to her heart's content. She confidently gives a thumbs up and enthusiastically says, "Leave it to me!" Under the city's starry night sky, countless streaks of shooting stars cut across, creating a spectacular and majestic sight. A group of people is walking, only their legs from the knees down are visible, showing the character's movement. As 5 snail people walk down the street in the evening, another snail person announces that they've lost their driver's license, surprising and empathizing with the rest of the snail people. Initially, Beret Guy looks directly at Wavy Hair Guy, but immediately after, a loud impact sound rang out near Wavy Hair Guy's head, implying a strike. Next, Beret Guy appears with a pen in hand, and Wavy Hair Guy seems to be looking at the pen. The boy stands in the middle of the room, looking distressed as he holds a hammer in his left hand, surrounded by several large, indistinct figures. One creature asks what's happening with this guy, while another creature looks surprised. In an empty classroom, a female student is writing formulas on the blackboard with her back turned. Outside, a 2-story school building appears under a gloomy sky, and inside, the school hallway leads to the door of class 3-2. The girl raised her sandal as if about to strike or having just struck something, while a loud sound echoed, and behind her was a blackboard with scribbled writing. The boy with a backpack on his shoulder smiled at the girl, who was also smiling and holding her phone, as he suggested they go home because school was out and asked what she was still doing there. In the classroom, the boy apologized to the girl named Siren and asked her to wait a moment, while she was wiping the blackboard because it was dirty. The boy looked sideways to the left, mouth slightly open, reassuring her that it was okay and to just leave it. The girl looked to the right with a thoughtful expression, holding her phone, and said that she couldn't do it, so someone else would have to do it instead. The boy turned his head to the left, looking surprised and a little worried as he reacted to a loud rumbling sound coming from outside. In the classroom, the boy and girl were looking out the large window, witnessing a rocket launching from a distance with a large column of smoke and fire, accompanied by the echoing sound V-wamo. The girl looked forward with a surprised expression as she said that space travel had become completely normal, and the dark-haired guy standing next to her replied realistically that it's only true if you have money. The boy thoughtfully considered that Ryerson from 3rd grade went to the moon during summer vacation and expressed a desire to do the same, while the girl stood behind, looking out the window. The boy and girl were sitting at their desks in the classroom, both looking out the large window, where a town with houses and mountains appeared in the distance, along with a rocket launching into the sky. The boy and girl sat next to each other, with their backs to the viewer, looking out the large window in a quiet classroom setting. The girl turned and called out, "Hey, towards the boy wearing a backpack who also turned to look at her. The long-haired girl looked at the dark-haired boy, asking what he would do there if he could go to the moon. The boy turned his head towards the girl, excitedly saying that he would jump around like crazy if he got to the moon. The boy sat opposite the girl in a vehicle, asserting, "Me too," while the girl covered her mouth, seemingly laughing or embarrassed. The dark-haired boy, with a radiant, enthusiastic smile, said that when he grew up, he would take his whole family to the moon, while the girl stood next to him, smiling and listening. The spiky-haired boy ran off, ambitiously saying that he would strive to get into a good university, find a good job, and become wealthy. Meanwhile, the dark-haired girl stood with her back turned, suggesting they wipe the board and then go home. The girl smiled and showed the boy that she could erase everything with just a swipe on her phone, making the boy surprised and ask again for confirmation. The boy smiled broadly, holding a chalk eraser, confidently saying, "Let me," as he prepared to erase the blackboard with the calculations already written on it. The girl beamed with her eyes closed, one hand covering her mouth, letting out a giggle. The teacher's hand is using a blackboard eraser to wipe away a section of the blackboard, where calculations and Japanese instructions related to the place value of numbers are still visible. The boy is attacked by a group of 4 bullies, falling to the ground as one grabs him, while the other 3 stand behind, observing or participating. A close-up of the boy's face shows a dazed, sad expression, with messy black hair, dark eyes, and a face smudged with red or dirt, along with a long rectangular earring on his right ear. The boy stands on the snail person, who lies on the ground with a turkey leg lodged in their face, while the boy holds a hammer, suggesting a violent scene. The boy looks over his left shoulder with a tired or pained expression, with small smudges on his neck and ear. He stands in the middle of an industrial room filled with mangled forms, with a "Do Not Use" sign on the door behind him. Boy A, with sharp eyes and a water-splashed face, stands in the foreground, while a soaked boy B, with the Japanese characters on his back, is only partially visible behind boy A. A mysterious silhouette walks down a dark, narrow industrial corridor, flanked by pipes, ventilation fans, and machinery. The corridor floor is cluttered with trash and some bone-like objects, creating a gloomy and abandoned atmosphere. The female lead squats on the floor, engrossed in biting a large piece of raw meat attached to a bone, her face smeared with food and an astonished expression, exclaiming, "This stuff is insanely delicious raw," and continues to enjoy it with relish. The black-haired guy stands watching the female lead, who is sitting on the floor, happily gnawing on a large bone with an extremely delighted expression, exclaiming, "Delicious! So tasty!" The female lead holds a large bone in her mouth, slightly open to show her enjoyment, exclaiming, "Absolutely delicious," as she savors her meal. The black-haired guy holds a large white bone, looking forward with a calm expression, a slight smile on his lips, and comments, "Those eyes are chewy." Well, the female lead bites deeply into a large chunk of food, her expression extremely joyful and satisfied with closed eyes, her mouth wide open revealing sharp fangs, her hands gripping the food tightly. Hand A is gripping the plastic bottle body tightly, complaining that Hand B closed the cap too tightly, making it stuck. Hand B then reaches out, offering to help open it. The black-haired guy and the female lead sit on the floor by the window at night, gazing at the city lights and a rocket launching into the starry sky. The black-haired guy holds a cylindrical object, smiling as he says it was easy, while the female lead reaches out with a dissatisfied expression, complaining that boys always have more muscle. The black-haired guy smiles confidently, saying he handled 5 at once and praising the other person for being good at finishing them off, while emphasizing that those things are not as tough as they look. The female lead smirks, holding a cola bottle and confidently declaring that this is easy, asking how many years the listener thinks she's been starving. The black-haired guy smiles lightly, remarking that the female lead was quite pessimistic before but is now enthusiastic again, and the female lead replies that it's reassuring. The black-haired guy smiles brightly, raises the cola bottle, and expresses optimism that he just thought they could actually do this. As news of aliens, mysteriously disappearing from Sanu City, spreads, the remaining aliens may become frightened and leave. In that case, they might truly eliminate them permanently, as wide-brim hat alien and small-horn alien walk on the sidewalk, and skateboard alien skates under the city lights. The black-haired guy looks to his left with a confident expression, a smirk on his face, and says, "Let's show them something terrifying." Meanwhile, the female lead looks at the black-haired guy with a worried expression, and the black-haired guy places a hand on her head. The female protagonist, with tired, drooping eyes, says she couldn't eat them if they left, while the black-haired boy stands beside her, looking straight ahead. The black-haired boy initially looks forward with surprised eyes and an open mouth, but then looks down, smiling gently and saying that perhaps it's not so, and they should just take it one step at a time. The black-haired boy stands with his back turned, looking out at the wide river under a starry night sky and a bright moon, holding a fishing rod and a bucket, expressing a wish that once their work was done, they should go fishing again because it would be a lot of fun. The girl with braids and the black-haired boy sit by the window, looking out at the starry night sky. The girl with braids talks to the black-haired boy, praising him for doing a good job today, and also reminding him not to tighten bottle caps too much anymore. Two large public notice boards display many missing person posters with stylized cartoon characters. The left board announces events at the Citizen Culture Center and the Art Theater, while the right board simply reads, Sitoo City, all emphasizing the message searching. Boy A and girl B are happily walking down a sunny street, both wearing straw hats and carrying school bags, smiling brightly. Behind them are buildings, trees, and a utility pole along with a notice board covered in many missing person posters, creating a contrast with the children's carefree demeanor. Boy A and girl B look up and smile brightly, both wearing hats. Behind them is an urban landscape with buildings, tangled power lines, and an elevated road structure, creating the impression of a busy city under a sky that appears to be drizzling. In space, a large satellite with solar panels glides past Earth's atmosphere, with many streaks of light and white specks surrounding it, emphasizing humanity's presence in the vast cosmos. The short-haired woman happily squats and chats with the boy in a public square. Behind them are a van, a row of trees, and a park area with benches and a canopy. Boy A smiles brightly, extending his arm and hand to point right then left, happily and energetically guiding other students in the correct direction. The girl smiles brightly, pointing two index fingers forward and suggesting a direction. Then, the girl and the curly-haired boy understand each other, and the girl asks again to confirm that direction. The female protagonist is violently ill in the middle of the road, liquid splattering onto the ground, while the boy and girl stand nearby, witnessing the scene. Persona, shocked and distressed, shouts, asking what they will do if the word left becomes a source of distress for the boy, and Boy B stands with his back turned, declaring he will never turn left again. Person C in the background, showing regret and self-reproach. My fault. The blonde man stumbles along the sidewalk, complaining about having too much to drink. Immediately after, the blonde man holds a phone to his ear with a slightly dazed expression, saying, "Hello." The blonde man is holding the phone to his left ear, listening to important information from the mysterious person that they have apprehended suspicious individuals via satellite, suspected to be a young man and woman. The blonde man is standing outdoors, holding the phone to his ear with a serious or annoyed expression, requesting the footage be sent, telling himself this is what he needs to clear his head, and wondering if Namamoto and Kidami have gotten into trouble. The female protagonist appears in a close-up with a horrified expression, wide eyes and a drooling mouth, showing extreme shock or terror. The female protagonist sits on a park bench, witnessing the blob boy confessing he had gambled away all his money, and the blob girl smilingly reassures him that it's okay. She will work hard to support him. In a flashback, the female protagonist seriously advises the girl with braids to try and control her urge to consume her neighbors, to avoid attracting police attention, while the girl with braids displays a hungry expression. In the present, a large figure greets the girl with braids and remarks that she doesn't smell today, while she still looks distressed and hungry. Barehead man seems confused about a nickname, while Barehead girl proudly shares the unique nickname, his honeybee, that her lover calls her. asking the female protagonist if it's creative. The female protagonist, with a stunned and almost disgusted expression, sarcastically comments that it's a truly delicious-sounding nickname. The snail man happily offers 20,000 yen, hoping to please the other party, but the female lead scoffs, implying he could do better. Meanwhile, the armed man beside them just stares blankly at the strange negotiation. Suddenly, the man in the suit appears and orders the female lead to follow him, leaving her astonished. At a convenience store, the black-haired guy sits lost in thought, reading a magazine with a pensive expression. Inside the store, two men discuss how they secretly dealt with 15 aliens in just 1 week, completely unbeknownst to the media. Stepping out of the store, the black-haired guy encounters a mysterious person who hints that their dream is about to come true as soon as the news breaks. The man in the suit coldly tightens the chain connected to the female lead's collar, declaring she must follow him too, but she just sticks out her tongue in defiance. Amidst the bustling city, the female lead and the black-haired guy sit side by side, both looking extremely tense and anxious. In a room, the man in the suit sits opposite the two young people, casually telling them to cheer up a bit. The black-haired guy angrily questions why he should be friendly with the one who abducted him, while the female lead also wonders about this peculiar restaurant. The man in the suit calmly explains it's an operational base and urges them to order, but reminds them to choose sparingly. The female lead excitedly demands spicy ramen, a stark contrast to the black-haired guy's sharp refusal to eat anything from this suspicious individual. Ignoring her companion's caution, the female lead slurps down her delicious bowl of noodles, leaving the black-haired guy to watch with exasperation. Because the dish is too spicy, the female lead grimaces and asks for water, but the man in the suit teases her by offering vodka instead, which she immediately refuses. In a holding cell, the black-haired guy anxiously ponders about leaving no evidence, but the white-haired man outside interrupts his thoughts and suggests getting straight to the point. With a knowing smile, the man holding a glass of iced water abruptly asks if he's eliminating aliens. Back at the table, the female lead calmly eats her noodles while the black-haired guy beside her can't hide his extreme astonishment. The man in the suit explains that satellite technology has changed and become much cheaper, simultaneously warning that they are being closely monitored. He reveals that even without seeing faces, satellites have identified their location, advising them to operate indoors next time, making the black-haired guy stunned and ask for the other person's identity. The man introduces himself as a Gloskar, someone whose profession is to eliminate aliens. A mysterious voice echoes, explaining that not everyone is indebted to aliens. Some even despise them to their core, which greatly surprises the black-haired guy. The man in the suit explains his role as an intermediary, connecting clients who wish to eliminate aliens with agents who carry out the task. He proposed cooperation, promising fair payment if they agreed to eliminate designated alien targets. Although the man in the suit tried to deny his involvement with the photo, the dark-haired guy adamantly rejected it, forcing him to back down but still trying to salvage the situation by asking one more thing. He revealed that managing alien remains was much more difficult than human ones, because no matter how they were handled, the distinctive foul odor would not disappear. Curious about that information, the dark-haired guy asked in a low voice about the specific method of handling remains that the organization was currently employing. Even though the remains had been crushed and mixed into concrete buried deep underground, the female lead still complained that the stench of decomposition would still rise to the surface over time. The man in the suit emphasized that this process contaminated the land, not to mention consuming a large amount of money and manpower. The dark-haired guy wondered how two individuals with nothing, no equipment, could successfully carry out such operations. He continued to press, questioning how they could eliminate numerous aliens from the face of the earth in just 1 week. With sharp, ambitious eyes, the man in the suit offered to learn the revolutionary method that the dark-haired guy's group was using. In his anxious thoughts, the dark-haired guy reassured himself that luckily they had handled everything discreetly inside Namamoto's house, so satellites couldn't detect it. Hearing that, the man in the suit pondered thoughtfully, his eyes assessing the situation with deep consideration. The man in the suit happily held the strange specimens in his hands, deciding that the secret of Namamoto's steel stomach and unusual palate must be kept from those beyond his control. Just as the female lead was about to blurt out that she had consumed them, the dark-haired guy immediately slammed the table and shouted loudly to stop her from revealing the huge secret. A fierce argument erupted as the dark-haired guy denied taking lives and flew into a rage at the baseless accusations. Observing that reaction, the man in the suit nodded slightly as if he understood the situation, his eyes showing acceptance of a new reality. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew tense as the man in the suit drew a gun and pointed it directly at the dark-haired guy, coldly declaring that his usefulness had expired. He threatened that Katami's hostile attitude would become a thorn in his side, then offered a sinister smile and wished him good night as a farewell. But just before he could act, the female lead swiftly splashed a glass of water directly into the man in the suit's face, stunning everyone. The two sides glared at each other intensely. The man in the suit wiped his face with an annoyed expression while the female lead stared back without a trace of fear. The dark-haired guy broke out in a cold sweat due to the precarious situation, while the female lead stood behind him, maintaining an inscrutable demeanor. The female protagonist firmly stated that Kitami must not be harmed, as she wouldn't be strong enough to defeat the aliens alone without him. The man in the suit calmly demanded his spicy ramen back and declared he would wait. But the black-haired young man suspected it was just an excuse when he saw the lighter in his hand. He pointed a weapon at the female protagonist, cruelly stating that the organization had no need for the weak and incompetent, causing her to bare her fangs in anger. Seeing his comrade's life jeopardized by the dark muzzle, the black-haired young man frantically agreed to cooperate to salvage the situation. The man in the suit retracted his weapon, asserting that their method of handling remains was still their secret, but offered an open condition. He demanded that both of them work diligently to earn their trust if they wished to know the secret, and that was the price for this cooperation. The man in the suit's face briefly showed complex expressions, from indifference to deep contemplation for his upcoming schemes. After the agreement was settled, he turned to the bar and loudly called out the nickname Backbone, and a mysterious voice immediately responded. The man in the suit handed over the task of summarizing the mission to the newcomer before going to shower, leaving the female protagonist and the black-haired young man bewildered by the strange name they had just heard. The girl in the hat appeared with a bright smile, introducing herself as their subordinate and assistant from now on. She quickly delved into the mission details, showing an image of the target at the Prime Hotel and requiring them to dress formally to blend in. Upon seeing the prepared suits, both the female protagonist and the black-haired young man couldn't hide their shock mixed with apprehension. Standing before the luxurious skyscraper, the black-haired young man complained about his ill-fitting suit, but the girl in the hat was busy on the phone and brushed him off. On the other end of the line, the man in the suit drank beer and gave a cold order. Collect the remains, and if they failed, she knew what to do. In the car, the girl in the hat revealed the target was Huntaway, a renowned philanthropist with a captivating appearance and a deceptive reputation. The black-haired young man remarked that thanks to the public's adoration of aliens, he had built a large, fanatical cult. Looking at the somewhat disheveled photo of the target, the girl in the hat expressed doubt about the antagonist's level of danger. However, Huntaway was actually amassing illicit wealth by having his subordinates organize fraudulent fundraising events, siphoning funds from people's goodwill. His team of volunteers hypocritically called for donations to help visually impaired children, luring in the gullible. They continuously incited the crowd to show support, creating pressure for everyone to open their wallets. The girl in the hat revealed the ironic truth. Their client was also a con artist competing for territory, aiming to eliminate a rival, turning this into a conflict between scoundrels. While the female lead struggled to tie her bow tie, the dark-haired guy took advantage of a red light to turn around and lend her a hand. After helping her, the dark-haired guy chuckled with satisfaction, declaring that this act officially made them sworn siblings. The girl in the hat outlined a plan to infiltrate through the back door in disguise, ignoring the female lead who was still grumbling about having to wear a torn suit without getting a new one. Standing before the building, the girl in the hat finalized their objective: to take down Huntaway on the top floor and fully entrust the other two with disposing of the remains. Walking down the hallway, the female lead grumbled about the heat, while the dark-haired guy reassured her that the cameras had been disabled and they had obtained the room key through bribery. Observing the organization's professional yet cold working methods, the dark-haired guy shivered, realizing it was nothing more than a production line that profited from lives. Suddenly, the girl in the hat's voice came through the communication device, urgently announcing that the mission was canceled. The sudden news left the female lead confused and defensively alert, while the dark-haired guy froze with a serious expression. It turned out their client had just been eliminated due to a territorial dispute, and the perpetrators were very likely the fanatics following Hunt away. The girl in the hat expressed relief that they hadn't acted yet. Otherwise, it would have been a wasted effort for a deceased client. But the dark-haired guy fell into deep thought. She casually invited them to eat, since the mission's bounty was gone, leaving her two teammates stunned by the rapid change of events. In a mundane moment, the dark-haired guy put his arm around the female lead's shoulder and asked about fried chicken, creating a humorous contrast to the previous tense atmosphere. Feeling his stomach rumbling with hunger, the dark-haired guy asked for the exit and was cheerfully directed by the girl in the hat. However, the girl in the hat's gaze suddenly changed. She smiled mysteriously and pointed towards a newly appeared target. Refusing to give up easily, both the dark-haired guy and the female lead looked through the crack in the door with fiery determination, vowing not to stop until they eliminated the aliens. A loud noise made the girl in the hat startle and turn around. The elevator display panel indicated someone was ascending to the 12th floor. Inside the elevator, the dark-haired guy bitterly observed that the other group was truly acting only for money, without any noble ideals. The female lead warned that eliminating the aliens would cut off the income source for the profiteers, and they would certainly turn against them. Despite those risks, both patiently waited in their neat suits, ready for an unavoidable confrontation. In a deserted hallway, the girl in the hat stood with a worried expression and drenched in sweat, clutching her phone tightly, her eyes fixed upwards as if awaiting ominous news. Receiving a threatening message from four-eyed oddity demanding he not return empty-handed, the male student fell into extreme panic, frantically searching the library for a way to dispose of the body. Meanwhile, the black-haired guy embraced the female lead and sternly warned her that if her ability to consume aliens was discovered, her freedom would be taken away, and meticulously instructed her not to reveal how to handle the remains. A voice echoed, pressing to know if she understood, forcing Namamoto, who hadn't quite grasped the issue, to reluctantly nod in agreement to move on. The female lead awkwardly realized her bow tie had come undone. Seeing this, the black-haired guy standing nearby proactively offered to help her tie it back. The scene shifted to a quiet perspective with winding railings, evoking a desolate and somber atmosphere. In a luxurious room, while a large creature lay sprawled on the bed, another smaller creature knelt amidst a pile of scattered money on the floor, creating a peculiar scene. The room was messy with banknotes scattered around a box labeled Love Fund, next to carelessly discarded clothes, suggesting a dissolute or opportunistic lifestyle. The snail person wrapped in a towel excitedly demanded to go to Hello Kitty or Mintako amusement park, but was immediately shut down by the other snail person with harsh and crude words. The snail person announced they would be out for a moment. Immediately, the female lead and the remaining member also decided to go along, while a hand quietly picked up a pack of cigarettes. The room door slammed shut with a loud noise, leaving a silent space behind. Surprisingly, the black-haired guy and the female lead rushed away amidst a shower of flying banknotes, causing nearby blob figures to exclaim in astonishment. The black-haired guy and the female lead aggressively stormed into the room searching for Hunt away, but they only received the answer from the curly-haired woman that he had left to buy cigarettes 15 minutes ago. While the black-haired guy and the female lead worried about the ticking clock and Backbone's pursuit, elsewhere, the hoodie-clad youth was going wild in the elevator, screaming to go home immediately. Chased away by the large snail person for polluting the air, the female lead, with a murderous expression and drooling mouth, growled, demanding the identity of the one standing before her. The black-haired guy launched a powerful attack on the monsters, causing liquid to spray everywhere, while the female lead nearby stared in shock at the chaotic scene. her face covered in strange fluid. The black-haired guy yelled, urging quick action, announcing it was mealtime, and loudly called Namamoto's name with extreme urgency. The girl in the hat peeked through the crack in the door, then suddenly darted down the hallway, running and shouting loudly, demanding the other person stop immediately. Facing the black-haired guy, the girl in the hat sarcastically remarked that they must have been quite pleased watching everyone from their overhead satellite system. In response to the suspicion, the black-haired guy sternly declared that the situation had turned around, and now they were the ones in charge of surveillance. The girl in the hat stood frozen, her stern face dotted with sweat, revealing extreme tension given the current situation. As she walked down the long corridor, the girl in the hat looked back and asked a suspicious question, wondering if the disposal of the body was happening at that very moment. With sharp eyes, the girl in the hat asserted that currently, only Namamoto was in that room. When the black-haired young man questioned her non-participation in the handling process, the girl in the hat remained silent, as an image of a strange cocoon floating in midair appeared in her mind. Sitting amidst a pile of money, the girl in the hat revealed that the key to the handling method actually lay with Namamoto, leaving the black-haired young man and the female lead stunned. Turning her back to the black-haired young man, the girl in the hat mused, inferring that Namamoto must play a crucial role in this disposal process. The girl in the hat commented on the strange combination of the opposing team's lineup but admitted it explained a lot, while also worrying that Namamoto's secret might have been exposed. Just as the black-haired young man was about to enter the room, the girl in the hat immediately stopped him and warned that he wasn't the only one holding the key to this place. Faced with the girl in the hat's suspicion, the female lead and the black-haired young man hastily clarified that the guarding was just a joke and they were just waiting to use the restroom, while also asserting that Namamoto was nothing special. In the empty room, with only scattered money and clothes remaining, the black-haired young man's voice echoed, revealing that the disposal task had been completed by the two of them long ago. Stepping into the ransacked room with scattered belongings, the girl in the hat couldn't hide her shock and worry, while the black-haired young man and the female lead stood behind, observing the scene. Looking around the chaotic mess, the girl in the hat was certain someone had been there, but she couldn't understand how they could have done everything so quickly. The black-haired young man announced that they had only dealt with 3 henchmen and hadn't eliminated Huntaway yet, which surprised the girl in the hat, who immediately pressed him about Huntaway's whereabouts. The entire group, including the girl in the hat, the black-haired young man, and the female lead, stood in silence, their eyes fixed in one direction, as if awaiting the arrival of an important figure. Before them was a lavish banquet table laden with all sorts of delicacies, from roasted chicken and seafood to wine, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere just moments ago. With the permission of the elephant-nosed boss, the boy in the suit ravenously devoured the food as if starving, while the black-haired young man and the girl in the hat stood by, witnessing this peculiar sight. Seeing the disheveled-haired person grin with a messy mouth after eating, both the black-haired young man and the girl in the hat broke into a sweat, confused about how to react. While the giant creature hinted at the mastermind, the black-haired young man quickly asked about the fate of the women, and the female lead frantically blurted out if they had been eliminated. In contrast to the black-haired young man's stern expression, the bubble creature couldn't hide its astonishment, repeatedly asking if he was truly serious about what he had just said. Amidst the room filled with money, the rabbit-ear blob exclaimed with admiration and bewilderment that the opponent could handle everything so cleanly without leaving any messy traces. When the girl in the hat pressed him about the method, the black-haired guy coldly replied that he had a long list of individuals he wanted to see eliminated. With a nonchalant attitude, the black-haired guy asserted that he would find a weakness to neutralize them all, an image of himself casually smoking in victory forming in his mind. To their surprise, the plump snail man declared his intention to recruit both of them to his side, promising double the remuneration, leaving the black-haired guy and the girl in the hat speechless with astonishment. The snail man turned his back, confidently asking if it was a good deal, disregarding the confusion still evident on the faces of the two people opposite him. Feeling insulted, the black-haired guy growled angrily, warning his opponent not to disrespect and toy with him like that. The black-haired guy and the female lead stared in astonishment as they saw an old woman calmly smoking next to a kneeling boy who was eating, prompting him to exclaim a bewildered, "What?" The female lead flatly declared that she didn't need money but only craved aliens, and would only consider the offer if provided with new dishes every day, much to the bewilderment of her companions. The large snail man excitedly embraced the female lead, declaring his induction into their fellowship, leaving the black-haired guy standing nearby with his mouth agape in shock. Suddenly grabbed tightly from behind by the snail man, who liked his eating habits, the black-haired guy panicked, struggled, and loudly called out Namamoto's name for help. The female lead licked her lips, regretting the wonderful taste of the recent meal, then firmly asserted that she couldn't eliminate Kidami because she needed his strength to hunt aliens until she grew old. In a flurry of thoughts, the character realized that if her craving for aliens was satisfied daily, there would be no reason for her to continue cooperating. An obvious truth gradually became clear. Neither Namamoto nor Backbone would gain anything if the alien species were completely eradicated. The black-haired guy asserted that Namamoto also detested and wanted to get rid of the aliens, but was immediately questioned by an invisible hand about the real reason. A close-up of the female lead's face, screaming fiercely, her mouth wide open to reveal sharp, menacing teeth. Watching the snail man lead the female lead away, the black-haired guy mused that perhaps she wasn't as cunning as he thought, but simply a straightforward individual. With a radiant smile, the female lead was described as the embodiment of Namamoto, one who lives by instinct and acts only based on what brings the most immediate satisfaction. The female lead cheered with delight upon seeing more food, but before her joy could fully settle, she uttered a contradictory expletive. While the black-haired guy desperately screamed, watching his teammate being restrained by the mascot bear, a cold voice rang out, ordering them to stand still, but the girl in the hat quickly fled the scene. The girl in the hat slumped motionless onto the table, while two blob figures stood on either side, silently observing her like peculiar wardens. In a high-rise room overlooking the night city, the black-haired guy and the girl in the hat were tied tightly to chairs, facing a bizarre white creature lying amidst scattered piles of money. The girl in the hat bowed her head sadly, while the dark-haired young man standing beside her, after a moment of suppression, suddenly looked up at the sky with extreme pain and helplessness. When the dark-haired young man asked about the other's whereabouts, the girl in the hat tiredly replied that they had gone to lunch with Namamoto, then let out a sigh that she herself was also hungry. Both fell into contemplation. The dark-haired young man couldn't understand her true purpose, while the girl in the hat agreed that the demands for joining were completely unreasonable. Sitting amidst piles of money and alcohol, the dark-haired young man bitterly admitted that even though they should have been pursuing the same dream, he completely failed to understand her as a person. With the wind blowing through her hair, the girl in the hat gazed distantly towards the city, softly mentioning the two words dream, with a tone full of hidden meaning. When the girl in the hat questioned him about the plan to eliminate aliens on a global scale, the dark-haired young man coldly replied that he only cared about the city, disregarding the rest of the world. The girl in the hat presented cold statistics, pointing out the absurdity of the plan when Sanu City had 60,000 aliens living among its populace. Ignoring all reason, the dark-haired young man asserted with his head bowed low that he would stop at nothing to achieve his goal, even though he himself was tormented by the question why. Memories flooded back with images of the girl in the hat smiling radiantly while fishing in the open sea, intertwined with the gentle smiles of an elderly couple beneath cherry blossoms, evoking lost peaceful days. Back to reality, the dark-haired young man shouted in anger, explaining that his love for the city and the pain of his homeland being invaded had made him unable to stand idly by. Hearing those words, the girl in the hat thoughtfully remarked that such an idealistic motive was perhaps far more terrifying and ruthless than merely acting for money. With a sharp, challenging gaze, the girl in the hat delivered a cruel judgment. He would never achieve what he desired. Amidst the vast city enveloped by night, a harsh truth echoed like a condemnation. After all was said and done, he was now left utterly alone. While the female protagonist salivated with desire before the feast, the furry creatures enthusiastically introduced the profiles of others with all sorts of interests, from barbecue to hip-hop music. As the shaggy monster excitedly boasted about a town full of addicts, the female protagonist was suddenly stunned when she received an order from a mysterious individual demanding that those targets be brought back deceased. After struggling to use a knife to cut the restraints, the dark-haired young man stood silently watching the bound man and the body covered with a white cloth on the floor, sighing in relief that he had finally freed himself. The anonymous individual revealed he had hidden a knife in his sleeve to free himself, then looked towards the destroyed forbidden book box, knowing that the enemy would surely return to this place. With a menacing look, the girl in the hat made the brutal decision to eliminate everyone, including Namamoto, to punish an unforgivable betrayal. With the deranged smile of a drama queen, the female protagonist excitedly repeated her intention to wipe out everyone, sparing no one. When the girl in the hat insisted on eliminating the traitor Namamoto for siding with the aliens, the dark-haired young man vehemently objected, arguing that she had lost her mind for wanting to eliminate her own kind for that reason alone. The female lead appeared as a frightening spirit, continuously inciting the hat girl to eliminate individuals and use magic to make the remains disappear to escape feelings of guilt. Hearing this, the hat girl was rendered speechless by shock and worry, while the female lead casually chuckled. Amidst a room cluttered with money, the dark-haired guy fiercely questioned the handling of the remains, asserting that only Namamoto could accomplish such a task. The hat girl angrily admitted, indignantly stating that this was precisely why they couldn't discard a lowly betrayer like her. Impatient with the other party's hesitation, the hat girl pressed for details about the secret technique. Finally, she received reluctant agreement to proceed with the plan. The hat girl fell into deep thought, her distant, calculating gaze suggesting she was weighing an important upcoming decision. With a face full of scratches and a sharp, cold gaze, the dark-haired guy made a stern declaration that they would eliminate Namamoto. At a diner, the dark-haired guy boasted about his associates, but was immediately refuted with astonishment by the snail man. The snail man couldn't believe his ears upon hearing the insane idea of bringing those individuals once they were deceased. The female lead looked annoyed and scowling, bluntly admitting that she wasn't strong enough to eliminate all of them herself, hence the need for assistance. While the female lead rambled on about presenting food politely, the round character stood dumbfounded. He stammered, repeating each keyword naively, completely unable to grasp this peculiar philosophy. The boy in the vest struggled violently as he was roughly dragged down the hallway by the animal-headed thugs. He yelled loudly, demanding to be released and threatening that his friends would come to settle accounts with them. Standing before the ransacked hotel room, a man berated his associates for not securing the captives properly. The female lead stood beside him, extremely panicked and confused, unable to comprehend where the prisoners had vanished despite everything seeming to be under control. The two pig-masked and bear-masked individuals searched the messy room, convinced that the target was hiding nearby. One asserted confidently that they were in the restroom, while the other advanced purposefully towards the bathroom to check. Inside the cramped restroom, the dark-haired guy acted with sudden brutality. He used the toilet brush to deliver a powerful blow to the adversary, creating a jarring thud. The hat girl moved cautiously, pressed herself behind the door and crouched low to avoid detection. Weapon clutched in hand, she stealthily approached the adversary from behind. Fluffy Headman and his associates watched as two mangled bodies were flung out of the room, landing with a thud on the money-strewn floor. The fleeting violent scene made the atmosphere grow heavy. The hat girl and the dark-haired guy stood stunned amidst the scattered money, gaping in astonishment. Before them, a bizarre white skeleton lay sprawled half in, half out of the doorway, creating a perplexing sight. Despite having taken a full punch to the face, the hat girl reassured the dark-haired guy that she was fine and had dealt with the adversary. The snail man, witnessing the scene, could only exclaim in horror at her tenacity. The aggressive snail man held a knife to the female lead's throat, using her as a hostage to intimidate the crowd. He shouted wildly, threatening to end her life immediately if anyone dared to step forward. Despite the blade at her throat, the female lead, blonde woman, maintained a defiant and arrogant attitude. The snail man, fluffy creature, turned to mock the dark-haired guy's friendship, but only received a sharp, cold gaze and a threat to eliminate him in return. The snail man suddenly bolted through the door, causing the dark-haired guy to angrily yell, giving chase. Meanwhile, the severely injured hat girl struggled to whisper a warning through her pain. All 3 elevators simultaneously showed downward arrows, signaling the target's successful escape to the lower floor, leaving an empty corridor. The hat girl panted heavily, desperately searching for something amidst the cluttered room. At the same time, the blonde woman was frustrated because the elevator was stuck on the first floor, worried that time was running out. The man in hat collapsed into a pool of blood, calculating that the enemy, carrying a hostage, would have difficulty escaping. Despite the pain, he struggled to get up to witness firsthand how they dealt with the remains. Snail Man unexpectedly slipped and tumbled over the broken stair railing. He fell straight down with a powerful impact, lying motionless at the foot of the spiral staircase. As he carried the unconscious victim down the stairs, Snail Man made a phone call with a smug expression. He believed that if he could just summon his associates, the situation would be completely reversed. The protagonist complained about her hunger, but Snail Man completely ignored her. He only focused on yelling into the phone with an aggressive attitude, showing no concern for his companion. In the cold, stark white corridor, the black-haired man ran frantically, pursuing his target. Behind him, Hat Girl stood with her head bowed, seemingly exhausted and unable to continue moving. The black-haired man turned back in shock, horrified to see Hat Girl standing there, her face and clothes covered in blood. Her pitiable appearance left him speechless. As he climbed the stairs, Snail Man hesitated, unsure who to call for assistance. Just as he decided to call the strongest individual, he unexpectedly slipped on a step. The protagonist rushed down the stairs, colliding forcefully with Snail Man, causing him to drop his phone in alarm. In the chaotic moment, she hastily reached out, intending to seize him mid-air. 2 hands clasped tightly together, vying for an object, veins bulging, showing the extreme tension of the struggle. Snail Man displayed impressive muscular strength, effortlessly hoisted the protagonist up the stairs with one hand. This sight left onlookers stunned and full of admiration. Snail Man laughed loudly, clapped his associate on the shoulder, praising them for being useful at the right moment. The other person could only sigh in relief, rejoicing at having narrowly escaped a perilous situation. A tearing sound echoed, and the protagonist experienced extreme pain as her arm was suddenly violently detached by a dark, shadowy object. Snail Man, sitting nearby, turned back in bewilderment, not yet comprehending the horror that had just occurred. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise, her eyes wide, staring at her left hand. It seemed to be undergoing a grotesque transformation, covered in a terrifying, rough, dark layer. The protagonist collapsed to the floor, filled with disappointment and embarrassment. It turned out her concern wasn't the injury, but the discovery that her favorite suit had been torn at the armpit. Snail Man lay flattened on the floor, complaining bitterly about the severe back pain tormenting him. He was completely helpless, unable to move even slightly. A colossal dark object suddenly hurtled down the stairs at terrifying speed, aiming directly at the bewildered target standing below, creating a powerful impact. The Noma Puncher delivered a brutal blow, sending Noma flying, leaving him heavily injured. The protagonist cheered excitedly at the sight, while Hat Girl, in pain, urged the group to leave immediately before Backbone arrived. The protagonist's eyes were wide and her mouth agape as she hastily gnawed on a large bone. She was racing against time to finish eating, disregarding her image.